I think that one thing SLPs can all do is more mindfully incorporate literacy tasks into our existing sessions. And this might include consciously working on phonological awareness and phonics and writing activities. For example, the research has shown that children with speech sound delays have a heightened risk for literacy delays. So we can strategically incorporate more phonological awareness and phonics into those sessions to provide some literacy intervention while still working on the primary goal of speech sound production.
Hey there, and welcome to the Speechie Side Up podcast. My name is Vanita Litvack, and I am so grateful you're here. I'm an ASHA certified speech language pathologist, author, and augmentative and alternative communication consultant who is obsessed with helping SLPs like you stop reinventing the wheel and connect with other SLPs in the trenches. Have you ever wondered how other SLPs seem to be doing it all with ease? Well, around here, you'll get to hear firsthand how SLPs are really getting things done while keeping evidence-based practice and self-care in mind. Think of this as a coffee date with your SLP friends. Get ready to be challenged and encouraged while we learn together. Today, I'm joined by Brianna Guild, a private practice speech-language pathologist in Ontario, Canada. She currently provides virtual speech therapy sessions primarily in the areas of literacy, language, and articulation. She is also the creator of SLP Literacy Corner and shares literacy resources and ideas for busy educators. Brianna, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So, does that cover everything, or is there anything else you'd like to add before we talk about reading interventions?
I think that covers everything. I did just want to put a little disclaimer out there that I'm not claiming to be a literacy expert. At the time of this recording, I've been an SLP for 5 years. I've taken additional literacy training and I try to keep up with the research. I'm passionate about literacy and sharing what I've learned with others, but I recognize there's always more to learn.
Well, what makes a literacy expert?
That's a really good question. I would say the researchers and the people who are in there doing the research to determine the best practices and what we should be doing. And in my mind, I think those would be the experts.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely like muddy waters because I was talking with Elizabeth from Manhattan Speech, Language and Literacy, and we were talking about Oregon Gillingham, and I was like, "Oh, is it like a certification or is it an approach?" And she's like, "It's an approach."
Mm.
So yeah, I and working in the school system, at least here in the United States in Florida, there were the literacy specialists, but I don't know what gave them the qualification to be a literacy specialist outside of receiving additional training.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think that we all benefit from continuing to learn, continuing to keep an open mind, and following what the research is suggesting is current best practices based on the knowledge we have.
Yeah, no, great points. So, what is the role of the SLP when it comes to literacy?
So, literacy falls within the very broad SLP scope of practice, and SLPs can have a really important role in literacy. We are the language experts, and literacy is written language. Our knowledge of language and its subsystems, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, this is all highly important for the identification, assessment, and intervention of literacy delays and disorders. SLPs can provide direct literacy assessment and intervention, and the average speech therapy session is also filled with tasks that are related to literacy, like oral storytelling, vocabulary development, and reading or writing words to target a variety of goals, like our speech and language goals. We always want to use functional activities as SLPs, and working on literacy is very functional. SLPs can also advocate for students' literacy needs and educate others to help more people better understand literacy development and the importance of structured literacy instruction. So I think to summarize, SLPs have three main roles: directly working on literacy, indirectly working on literacy by using literacy tasks to work on other goals, and advocacy and education.
Yeah, that's a great point. What are your preferred assessment tools for this area?
There's a lot of really good assessments out there. It kind of depends on what information you're looking to gather. I'm trained in the Ascend Smarter Intervention reading and writing curriculum, so I use their assessment materials. There's also a lot of other great resources out there, like the Dibbles, as well as the Cubed assessment by Language Dynamics Group.
Okay, thank you so much. So, how do you incorporate literacy into existing sessions, let's say like an articulation session?
Yeah, so SLPs, we're using literacy tasks when we have students read words during a game to work on speech sound production, or we're using book reading and storytelling to work on language goals. I think that one thing SLPs can all do is more mindfully incorporate literacy tasks into our existing sessions. And this might include consciously working on phonological awareness and phonics and writing activities. For example, the research has shown that children with speech sound delays have a heightened risk for literacy delays. So we can strategically incorporate more phonological awareness and phonics into those sessions to provide some literacy intervention while still working on the primary goal of speech sound production.
Okay, that's so important. It's something I think about a lot. Like when you're looking at state testing for these kiddos and maybe they're not doing well in the state testing. It's like, what is it actually looking at? What is it actually assessing? And their reading is a big part of that. Literacy is a
Mhm.
big part of that. Do they have the foundational skills to not only read it, but comprehend what they're reading? And how is that going to impact their academic success? So, great points that you brought up. We're going to talk a little bit about example activity ideas. So, I'm very excited for that. But just a personal opinion question, the field in general is moving towards child-led, like follow the child's lead. I know there's parts of that that you should be doing in literacy intervention, but is there also room for like structured intervention with literacy?
Absolutely. So, structured literacy instruction is systematic and it is explicit. The research shows that that is how we need to be teaching literacy skills. But I definitely think that there's a lot of room for following the child's lead in the materials that we're choosing.
Mm.
For example, a lot of my clients are very interested in Pokemon, and I happen to be a big Pokemon fan myself. So, I will use Pokemon in our sessions for our materials. So, for example, if we're reading words that have the CH digraph, SH digraph, if we're working on digraphs, I will find Pokemon names that have those digraphs and we'll practice the phonics skill, but within a context that's interesting for them, being Pokemon.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We talked about this a little bit before we started, but my 3.5-year-old, we're like working on phonics right now. And I feel bad sometimes because I'm like, this is very structured, like ABA. And I know we're not supposed to be doing that, but I do incorporate her interest, which is princess. So I'm glad to hear that it's okay to do that. Like that's how literacy is not. I had taken the toddlers can read course. And one of the things he said was that literacy is a skill that has to be taught. It is not
Mhm.
something that comes naturally.
Mhm.
So it would make sense that it is a little bit more structured.
Yeah, I think it can still be fun and engaging within that structure.
Right. Yeah. You just have to be super creative. Even if you're just working on letter sounds, like, how can we hop on these? Or how can we, smash Play Doh on them? I
Mhm.
guess it's like articulation therapy in the same sense. That also is structured and you need to get a lot of trials in.
Yep, really good comparison there.
That makes sense. Okay. So, can you give some example activity ideas for literacy specific intervention with the discussion of phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension?
So, starting with phonological awareness, then, this is the ability to recognize and manipulate the sounds in spoken language, including words in sentences, syllables in words, and phonemes in words. The research has identified the particular importance of phonemic awareness skills in reading and writing, specifically phoneme blending and segmenting. To read or decode a word, an individual must determine each individual phoneme and then blend these phonemes together to read the word. And oppositely, to spell a word, an individual must break the word down into each phoneme and determine how to spell each phoneme. So we can see these skills are really important in reading and writing. An example of an activity, one thing I like to do, like we talked about, getting really hands-on and engaging, is using different manipulatives, something as simple as a small bowl. For example, we might be working on phoneme segmenting and blending. So I would give a student the word, keeping with that digraph example, a word might be chop. What are the sounds in chop? And a student could use a ball to segment the word into phonemes, tapping it on the floor or a surface once for each sound. So ch, ah, p, and then roll it across the surface to blend it back together, chop.
That's a great idea. I love that.
So phonics, let's talk about what it is first, then I'll give a couple ideas. Phonics is the relationship between the sounds of spoken language and the letters of written language. For example, the letter N represents the sound N, and it's the first letter in the word net. Phonics instruction includes learning about morphology, multisyllabic words, syllable types like closed, open, magic E, are controlled, vowel team, stable final, as well as the schwa vowel sound, which is the most common vowel sound in English, and irregular words. So there's a lot that we can teach under this phonics umbrella. One resource that I found really helpful for phonics instruction and activities is A Fresh Look at Phonics by Wiley Blevins. And two activities that he outlined in that book are word building and word sorting. So you can do these activities with any target phonics skill that you're working on. In word building, students are given a set of letters and asked to create words. For example, they might be given a set of letter tiles and they're asked to find the letters to spell the word block. And then they would find the tiles, spell the word block, B-L-O-C-K. Then they're told to change the letter B to C and read the new word, which would be clock. For a greater challenge, you can tell the student to make the word block and then change it to clock. And this would be harder because they have to determine which letter to move, which letter to add, and in what position, as opposed to telling them specifically what letter to swap out. And then word sorts. Students are given a set of words and they have something in common, and they're asked to sort the words by their common feature. You might have a closed sort where you tell them how to sort the words. Maybe you're looking at long A vowel teams and sorting words into the two groups AI versus AY. You could also do an open sort where the student has to figure out how to sort a group of words that you give them, or a bunch of words that you give them, into two different groups. And then after the sort is done, you want to talk about what they notice about the spelling rule. So in this example, they might notice that all the AI words, AI is in the middle of words or syllables, and AY is used at the end. So talking about specifically when we use those spellings.
Okay. And what about fluency? Did we talk about that one yet?
Not yet. So reading fluency refers to the ability to read accurately at an appropriate rate and with suitable expression. Accurate reading means that the individual words are read exactly as the author wrote them. Rate or automaticity refers to the speed with which text is read, which should be a conversational speed. It's not about just going as fast as you can. Expression or prosody includes the pitch, tone, volume, emphasis, rhythm in speech, as we know, but also in reading. It also includes the reader's ability to chunk words into meaningful phrases and use punctuation as a cue to pause appropriately within and at the end of sentences. Something you can do to help students with that would simply be highlighting punctuation in a text so that they have a visual reminder to pause appropriately. Poetry reading is also great for working on reading fluency. I typically use poems from poetryforkids.com. I try to pick one that I think my student will enjoy. So, again, pulling on those interests, something that would be engaging for them to read. And then also, I make sure that it has words with our current phonics focus, for example, Magic E. And then I have a little routine that I've developed where I read the poem out loud to them in session. I model that fluent reading. We reflect on my accuracy rate and expression. And then they're following along while I read. We talk about what the poem means, identify the rhyme scheme and our target phonics words. And then they take a turn reading the poem once they've heard my fluent model. And we reflect on their accuracy, rate, and expression. Then they read it at home. I typically ask students to read it at least 3 times for that repeated practice. And in the next session, we discuss how the reading went, and they read it again, and we reflect on their reading fluency now compared to their initial reading. This repeated reading is really important for building fluency, and we need to find ways to do it in a way that's meaningful and engaging. So I find that reading fun poems and getting people involved at home can be a good way to make this a meaningful repeated practice.
Love that.
Oh, another point here, circling back to incorporating literacy activities into speech therapy sessions. I've started using poems with my speech clients who are at that sentence to conversation level with their target sounds. I do that exact same routine that I just outlined, but I'm purposefully selecting poems that have multiple words with the student's target sound rather than a phonics skill.
Makes sense.
All right, we're on to vocabulary then. This is a component of literacy that SLPs are very strong in. Vocabulary is the understanding of words and their meaning. It encompasses both receptive vocabulary, the listening and reading, and expressive vocabulary, speaking and writing. In addition to learning word meanings, vocabulary instruction should explicitly teach grammar and syntax rules so readers understand how words are combined to form sentences. So I think this is an area of literacy that SLPs probably don't realize we're already working on in our sessions. So many of our sessions, we're doing vocabulary development, we're building oral language skills, and this is a foundational skill for reading. So we're working on vocabulary development already with individuals of all ages, and that work is supporting their literacy skills since vocabulary is so crucial to literacy. So an activity idea here. This is a good one for combining vocabulary and phonics into one activity. It's called word ladders or word chains. You give a student a starting word and clues for changing it into another word by changing one sound at a time. I'll try to explain one out loud. So visualize a ladder with some rungs. Say you're working on CVC words with short A. You might give the starting clue a pet that purrs. And the student would say cat. And then they would write cat on the bottom rung of the ladder. Then you give another clue, like change one sound in cat so the word is something you wear on your head. And the student would say hat and write hat on the next rung. So you continue the activity until you get to the top of the ladder. It is similar to that word building activity we discussed earlier for phonics, but with this added vocabulary component because of the clues that you're giving them. So they need to understand what word you're describing to them.
Awesome.
This is another one that I adapted to use with speech clients by using words with their target sound. So for an R client, I might do this exact same activity, but I've written out a ladder of R words. For example, red, rod, rot, rat, and so on. So we're getting all that R practice, but within an activity that's also working on phonics and vocabulary skills.
That's awesome. I have a question. You have a TPT store. Have you adapted materials that address both the articulation and the literacy piece?
Yeah, so
Oh,
I
cool.
have things like word ladders and 4 in a row games, and I use those activities with both my literacy clients and my speech clients.
Oh, that's great. Okay, that's really good to know. Thanks for sharing that.
Of
And then
course.
what about comprehension?
Yeah, the last component of literacy we'll talk about is comprehension. This is another area that SLPs know really well. Comprehension is the understanding and interpretation of what is read. It's the overall goal of reading, and it's the result of the integration of all these components we've already discussed. One helpful resource for reading comprehension is the Reading Comprehension Blueprint by Nancy Lewis Hennessy. This book outlines the importance of distinguishing between processes and products of reading comprehension. The processes are the cognitive activities that help a reader get to the product. For example, we have to activate background knowledge, make predictions and inferences, monitor our understanding of words, and so on. The products are what a reader understands and knows after reading. We might demonstrate understanding through a story retell or answering comprehension questions. And I think a lot of times people use these as indicators of comprehension. If a student's answering these questions correctly, but if they're not, we have to think about why and go back to the processes. Did they
Mhm.
not have the appropriate background knowledge? Were they not monitoring their understanding of words? Are they not able to make accurate inferences? So, if we see something breaking down in the product side, it can be really helpful to step back and think about the processes. And if there's some skills there, we can support.
Great point. And I'm sure there's so much more too. Executive functioning skills, like the presence of dyslexia, all of that,
Yes,
right?
there's so much executive functioning involved with literacy that short term memory, attention, tons of things going on.
Yeah, I bet.
And even with reading comprehension, there's so many different instructional components to support reading comprehension. Vocabulary plays another role here, understanding the words, and then sentence comprehension. Can we understand each sentence? Text structure, like narrative versus informational, understanding how those texts are made up. And then, of course, the background knowledge and levels of understanding and inference. So there's a lot that goes into reading comprehension. As far as activity ideas, one thing at the sentence level, at sentence comprehension level, it can be helpful to work on sentence combining and expansion with students. Again, I think this is something that a lot of SLPs are doing orally, and even just adding a written component can be very helpful when we explicitly teach students how to combine sentences using conjunctions like and, but, because it will help students better comprehend sentences they read that use those words because then they understand what those words mean, why they're used. And so when they read a more complex sentence containing those, the longer sentence, the combining the different points, they can extract more meaning from it if they understand those conjunctions.
Great points. Love that. What about there's like all of these different facets of literacy, right? Are you addressing them all at the same time? Are you going in a specific order?
So a lot of these activities are working on multiple skills
Mhm.
at the same time. And reading instruction isn't working on, phonics first and then vocabulary. They're all intertwined. We're working on a lot of these skills within one activity.
Okay, that's good to know. And the fact that they work on top of each other makes sense as well. There's like a braid, a literacy braid, right? Does
Yeah,
that
Scarborough's reading rope.
yeah, is that like leveled, that rope?
So, Scarborough's reading rope isn't leveled. It shows how word recognition and language comprehension combine to achieve that reading comprehension, that ultimate goal of reading.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. This has been so informative, and I know we could talk about this for probably an hour or two. I definitely think SLPs in general are becoming much more interested in literacy, which is great because it is so intertwined with the speech aspect and just academic success overall. And I'm really appreciative of you coming on. And I don't think this will be the last time that we'll be talking at all about this topic. But if people are interested in learning more, looking at your TPT store, or connecting with you, where can they find you?
So on Instagram, you can find me at slp.literacy.corner. And then everywhere else like Facebook and TBT, if you search SLP Literacy Corner, you should find me. I also have a website that has a blog where I go into more detail about a lot of these topics.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brianna. This has been great.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. By the way, have you joined the SSU crew yet? By joining, you get access to the free goods section on our website, plus podcast updates, special event notifications, and therapy inspiration. You can sign up at bit.ly/join SSU crew, all lowercase, or just find the link in this episode description. Also, don't forget to take a screenshot of this episode so that you can always refer back to it and share it on social media if you really love the topic. Take care and remember to always fill your speechy side cup first before you can pour into others.